So welcome everybody. Thank you for attending. We think we've got a pretty interesting program for you today. And the topic here is about scaling research data, the lessons from the NCSA archive strategy, but specifically around the implementation of LumOS and how that has had a significant impact on the NCSA computing environment. So we'll jump into the program in just a minute. We want to tell you a great story about how you can benefit from the technology that Spectra continues to move forward, namely the LumOS operating system for your tape library. But I wanted to start first with just a few quick housekeeping items. So first of all, we want to make sure that you get the information that you need. So supporting collateral will be available in the chat box. Jake, our producer today, will put those items. There'll be several assets, not the least of which will be a LumOS data sheet that can give you much more information on specifications and things like that. Again, that'll be in the chat box. Secondly, is the most important part of the webinar is that we want to answer your questions. That's what we're here for today. And so you should see in the menu bar for Zoom, there's a black menu bar that there's a Q&A box. If you don't see the Q&A box, scroll over to the right and you'll see a more item. And then underneath that, you'll see the Q&A box. Oops, hold on. Sorry. Please feel free to ask questions at any time. Wow. Lost control here. Hold on, folks. Having a technical problem. Let me get back on track here. There we go. So again, the most important part is that Q&A. We want to hear from you. We want to answer your questions. If by chance we don't get to your question, we'll have information at the end, a contact sheet, or you can contact your Spectra account exec or sales exec or a sales engineer. They'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have about LumOS or anything else. So again, that Q&A box should be under the more, or you should be able to see it directly. And it looks like Jake's gone ahead and posted some of those assets in the chat box. And then lastly, sorry guys, my computer is not behaving today. Lastly, just a reminder that all the mics have been muted to reduce background noise. So, and last mention here, you can ask those questions at any time. They'll just form up in a queue, and then we'll get to them after we get through the content of our presentation today. So let's jump into the bios, and I've actually got the bios printed out so I don't mess this up. So first of all, I want to tell you a little bit about NCSA, and then we'll have JD kind of give you a little bit more on the NCSA mission because it's absolutely fascinating. So first off, the National Center for Computing Applications, otherwise known as NCSA, at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and it's a leading center for high-performance computing, AI, and also supports a wide range of research disciplines, basically anything you can imagine. It includes massive supercomputers that are solving complex science and engineering challenges. So really, we're talking about a cutting-edge computing environment here in rarefied air, to be sure. So first, let me introduce JD Maloney. So JD Maloney leads the storage engineering at NCSA. He focuses on architecture, operations, performance, and is also an instructor for the LCI HPC storage program. So JD, please say hello.
Hey, everybody. Nice to see you.
Next, we have JD's colleague, Brian Dickinson, who's a research storage engineer at NCSA. He's been there. He's got 12 years of experience in tape storage, specializing in HPSS, Scout AM, and large-scale environments. And Brian is also uniquely qualified as a Spectra alum. So Brian, if you wouldn't mind saying hello, please.
Hello, folks. Happy to be here.
And then last but not least is Matt Ninesling, who does a number of things. He wears a lot of hats, but he's been in the business a really long time, and he's got the unique perspective of having been or being one of the, I would say, the top experts in the industry. He leads the tape business as our business unit executive here at SpectraLogic. He's spent over 2 decades developing advanced enterprise storage technologies, including our flagship Tfinity and Spectra Q tape libraries.
Thanks, Ted.
And then lastly, I'm Ted Odie. I'm the product marketing director at SpectraLogic, and I'm your host today. And with that, let's move on. First of all, I just so the first question that we had talked about, JD, is giving us a little bit of the background, the big picture, right? And so we've got the Granite system here, which is massive, right? 19 frames. And then we'll have Brian talk a little bit about some of the mechanics, what does your infrastructure look like? But JD, I'd love to start with you giving us a picture of the mission. What is the mission that you're supporting, and how do you support that mission?
Sure, yeah, thanks, Ted. Yeah, so NCSA supports a wide range of missions. We're not singularly focused like maybe certain like DOE or other sites. NCSA falls underneath the National Science Foundation umbrella, and that is just opens up to a very large range of science domains that we support. We have a bunch of people that are like archiving videos from pigs at our South Farms onto this tape system. People that are archiving data have microphones across the country listening to bird calls and recording those and pulling that data in. There's a lot of large simulation data sets that we do too, and the more classic HPC data set side of things as well. There's a whole host of science domains that are out there. The system is allocated via multiple ways. It supports researchers at the state of Illinois, but it also supports researchers at the national level through the NSF Access program. So we have teams from, I think, 25 plus institutions that have data stored on Granite right now, and that number grows every month as new teams get onboarded to the system. And then also we do have a large industry sector program that we work with as well. And so we have some industry partners that we provide resources to at NCSA that also have archive space on this system. So there's a very wide gamut of projects that we support with this platform. So.
Wow, no pressure there. Sounds like
Yeah.
you guys have a ton of responsibility. So Brian, if you wouldn't mind, take us through the architecture, if you wouldn't mind.
So as we can see, the final destination is a 19 frame Tfinity library. In front of that, we have 5 different Dell R730s. One of the big parts that we really take pride in as Granite is this started as kind of a rebuild sort of. We took hardware that we are recycling and we're able to make this into a new enterprise system. So those are 730s. They are scheduled to be upgraded here within the next year, but right now they are running Scout AM. Each one has a different IP address to the public domain. Each one has its own IB interface to our DDN14KX disk cache, which is using solid state disks for the metadata. It's using hard drives to store the data. It's currently configured for about 2+ petabytes just to be able to store that on the cache itself. And then in front of that is just essentially our WAN network. We can come in via S3, we can come in via Globus. So it's a very simple setup. It doesn't take a lot to actually put this together with the resources that we've come with and the providers that we use.
So many questions, and then we'll get to Matt, who will take us through what makes LumOS so amazing and how it can revolutionize. But I wanted to ask you a couple questions. We'll have Matt run through LumOS, and then we'll take the audience Q&A as well. But a couple questions for both you, Brian and JD. Can you help us understand what role does Scout AM play in this infrastructure?
Yeah, so Scout AM in and of itself is the archive manager, Scout archive manager. In front of that, the file system is, of course, Scout FS. And all of this comes through Versity. And it's really it is the mover itself. It's kind of the big lift. People essentially land data on the file system. Scout AM has its own internal scheduler, comes in, sees those new ads based on its different policies. It puts them to certain tapes. which is extremely easy to manage between the partitions on the library and Scout AM itself. Um,
Mhm.
so that's essentially it. And then if a researcher wants that data, they see that same POSIX file system setup via S3, well, via Globus, and then they can also see their buckets via S3 with the standard AWS CLI query or any S3 um, tool these days. And they can just pull it back. It'll take some time, obviously, coming off the library, but they'll get it back. They'll have it responded to them when it's there.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning too that, and Matt, if you want to add something here too, is, Spectra's worked extensively with Versity. We've got a deep partnership with them, so that all of this integration works really well. And we've implemented features and capabilities that, basically take advantage of the strengths of each of these components within this solution. So it's not something that you just, bolt together. It's something that's actually been architected to work together. Matt, did you want to add anything to that about our relationship or how Scout AM works with us?
No, that's all accurate, and we do work really closely with Versity, and we try to work really closely with a lot of the larger, backup software HSM, applications out there because really making a cohesive, archive system works a lot better for the end user. So things like, with Versity in our next LumOS release coming out in about a month now, we'll have robotic zoning through the REST API so that Versity will be able to use parallel robotic actions with the Tfinity. And we've done that historically with HSMs like HPSS and DMF, where we worked really closely with them, and we did that through the SCSI interface because that worked better for their application. But the idea is these very large enterprise environments, we need to work on the entire system, not just on the tape library, and we need to be a close partner with the software vendor because like Brian said, it's a very integral part of the entire system, right? In the end, the tape library is told take a tape, move it from a slot, put it in a drive, and keep that run that forever. But that software is the thing moving data to tape, and they have to work really, really well together. So the end goal is to make that happen if at all possible.
Yeah, that's a great point or set of points, Matt, that we're better together, if you will. There's this tremendous synergy that occurs when we take the strengths and capabilities of both what Spectra does and what Versity does. Uh, the next question I'd love to ask, and I'm going to say this is for both JD and Brian, would love to hear a little bit about how Lumos implementation has helped your organization, has changed your workflow. Just give us an idea what the impact has been after Lumos was implemented in your shop.
Yeah, I can start on that, and then Brian can definitely pick up on things that I missed. The two big things for me that I'll call out is one is just the API that comes with Lumos. We've done a lot of work coding against that API to extract a lot of telemetry from the library, a lot of statistics, and allow us to better spot a lot of things that are going on in patterns as we do work on putting data into and pulling it out of that library. It's good for us to note that. Also, as we're running LTO9 and LTO10 tapes here in the future, there's a lot of things you need to keep good track on, and humidity and temperature. And it's always good to get a lot of that stuff out of the library and pull out what it's seeing. So the API has been huge for us, and it's been extremely responsive. And we query it very regularly. Every 5 minutes, we're hitting it and getting stats out. So that's been very helpful for us. We've really liked that API and pulling things out of there. It's way better than what we were able to get out of BlueScale. And then also, I know it's not something that happens very often, but the time to boot the tape library on Lumos is just way faster than it was under the BlueScale days. We had to there was a partial circuit power outage for some electrical work about 6 months ago, and it's something where like, oh, the library's up after like 2 or 3 minutes, seemingly 4 minutes after we booted it up. Versus, I could have fit in probably a good, TV show watching an episode before BlueScale would have booted up. So, obviously not a huge thing, not some power cycling in the library every day, but it kind of just highlights to me the responsiveness of Lumos over BlueScale. It's just way faster and way snappier to use, especially when we're like working through other tape operations that are our normal operating procedures for the days. It's just way faster at handling what we need it to do. I'm sure Brian can expound on that too.
So yeah, piggybacking off that, the performance and usability of Lumos is night and day compared to BlueScale. The touchscreen interface alone is actually seems responsive. You don't need to kind of double tap here and there. You're not misplacing keys when you're typing in your passwords just because you don't know if it hit the key twice, if it didn't hit the key. BlueScale's interface on the touchscreen itself was always very sluggish and slow. Lumos has greatly increased the ability to just work with the library. On top of that, the fact that you can multitask with Lumos has made my job easier. I can make partition changes, or I can do something while I'm still looking at data for MLM, or while I'm trying to figure out is this tape actually in this drive, so I can troubleshoot problems while also making changes in certain things. And that's a big thing that BlueScale never had. Once you ran an operation, you were stuck on that operation. Even if you tried to go through the remote login connection, BlueScale would still not let you do anything while it's working. So that was the big thing for me. And like JD had mentioned, just under having the telemetry that we have now is a lot more useful for us. The humidity factor really hit us and was a big surprise when we moved to LTO9s. Because all of a sudden we wouldn't get a notification that the drives were down, they'd just turn themselves off.
Wow, that's interesting. So, JD, you mentioned that you did some programming to work with, I'm assuming it's the REST API within Lumos. That's really interesting. I just want to ask the question before we jump into Matt's content here is, can you give us an idea? You mentioned the parameters that you're watching. How easy was it to do that programming and that integration?
It was not very hard at all to do. Honestly, the REST API was very well documented, and we were able to go through that and kind of pull all those stats out pretty quickly. It was probably for me like probably 8 to 12 hours of work to get everything pulled out and into our telemetry system. A big thing for NCSA on the telemetry side of things is that a lot of vendors across multiple storage platforms, archive and non-archive, are very proud of their GUIs, and we push our vendors a lot on good APIs because a lot of what we do, we cross-correlate a lot of telemetry across multiple systems that aren't all provided by the same vendor. So the ability to extract telemetry into our central telemetry system is very important for us because it allows us to see those things and correlate events when we have all that data put together. And so, yeah, that was just a huge thing for us to be able to pull that stuff out via the API. So,
And I got to ask one more question because this is a fascinating topic, but I don't want to get us down off of a side road here. But do you react to those environmental conditions? So you mentioned, Brian, that you would not understand maybe why a tape drive was idling or wouldn't write or something like that. But then now, because you have that information, are you taking action based on that data?
Yeah, essentially, yes, is the answer to that. So to give a bit of detail there is Scout AM would get a command from the drive saying, I'm out of my humidity threshold, turn me off, and it would turn the drive off. But it wouldn't tell us that. There's nothing built in that would actually notify us that. On top of that, now knowing the humidity readings from the library, we can actually see ahead of time that our humidity is trending downward. So we have limits built in to tell us, at 23% humidity, hey, you're too low. You're going to start turning off tape drives if you get any lower. So then we check in with our data center operations and make sure that, hey, the humidifier is working. If it's not, is it, address the situation appropriately. Versus what actually happened one time, came back and all 20 drives were just offline.
So, Matt, this makes me think of something that we do that nobody else does is the built-in weather station. Can you just give us a quick take on that? It sounds like this is invaluable in this environment.
Yeah, and that's part of the Lumos upgrade is we actually, in every Tfinity, we add a dedicated weather station in the base frame, in the main frame in the library. We also do have weather stations on both of the high-performance transporters. They aren't quite as accurate, though, so we really key off of that weather station that we install in the library when we upgrade it to Lumos. And then we add all that reporting into the Lumos application. And you can get that, like these guys are using over the REST API, or you can look at it just through the UI, through the front panel on the library or the remote interface. And it gives you the ambient environment inside the cabinet. It doesn't tell you. The other problem is that historically what you would get is the environment of the tape drive. which is always hotter and lower humidity than the ambient where the tapes are kept, because you're heating up the air inside the drive as it goes over all these hot components, and that also takes humidity out of the air. So this tells you the actual ambient environment where your tapes are stored, which is really what the spec is based on. So it gives you the right information to understand what's happening, where those tapes are for that long time, archive for the next 10, 15 years, however long you're going to keep them there inside the library.
Incredibly powerful, Matt. So let me kind of turn it over to you. I think we've got a whole bunch of different folks with different interests on the call today. We looked through some of the attendees. We've got folks that are existing customers that are considering LumOS, want to know, but we've also got folks who are interested in what the roadmap is. So Matt, we'll turn it over to you, and then we'll wrap it up with some Q&A from the audience. So Matt, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Yeah, and I know we've gone over this in some other webinars and stuff, so we'll cover these fairly quickly. But LumOS is an entirely new management or platform for all of our enterprise libraries. So we spent about 7.5 years in development before we first released LumOS. We released it about almost 2.5 years ago now. In January 2024, and we started upgrading Tfinities initially, and we started shipping new Tfinities with LumOS. We then released T950 with LumOS, so all new T950 ship with LumOS, and all T950s in the field are upgradable to LumOS. And then about 9 months ago, or 6 months ago, we released T200, T380, and T680 upgrades to LumOS. So now all of our TerraPack-based enterprise libraries are capable of running LumOS, and everything out in the field is also upgradable to LumOS. And we've upgraded some T950s that are 20 plus years old. They've been running out there in the field for a couple decades. We upgrade those to LumOS, and now it's essentially equivalent to almost like a new library shipping from the factory, which is pretty cool. That's not always possible for a lot of these type of systems, to have that kind of longevity and to have kind of a second boost of life into the future.
So it's not only teaching an old dog new tricks, and I don't like that term old dog, but it's really teaching some amazing tricks.
Yeah, and it really does give you the ability to keep that capital asset, that archive system, with new tape drives and preventative maintenance and that those kind of operations for even longer into the future, without having to go back and revisit and purchase an entirely new system.
So I just want to capitalize on what you said a little bit here. So the only way you can get in the environmental conditions of your cartridges is with a Spectra weather station. And I think the other thing too is that we have a really unique approach to investment protection, right? The ability to upgrade a library that's been around for decades, but also if you're transitioning from an Oracle or an IBM library or upgrading LTO technologies, we're the only folks that can handle multiple technologies as well.
Yep, and we do have a number of customers in the field that are running both enterprise drives and LTO drives in the same system. The NCSA library is a great example of that. These guys used to have enterprise IBM drives, and then over time they saw where that roadmap was headed, and they converted to LTO, and we were able to transition that library in the field in place to have a mix of technologies for some amount of time, and then we can even optimize it on LTO, when needed. So there's a lot of capabilities there to keep that really large capital investment applicable for as long as possible into the future, and that helps a lot of users out.
Yeah, and I'm going to take slight issue, Matt, with something you said. Enterprise drives, the distinction between LTO and enterprise drives is rapidly disappearing, right?
They've essentially become equivalent when you get to LTO 10. It would be the same technology, the same hardware platform that the drives are built off of. But historically, there has been a difference, and they've been kind of in the market categorized as enterprise or LTO if you're looking at either TS, T10K as enterprise, or LTO as LTO. At this point, LTO is the dominant factor in tape, and really the only thing into the future that's going to see a long-term roadmap on any of these systems, even outside of Spectra.
Great. So I've interrupted you, Matt. Let me turn it back to you so that you can finish telling us about LumOS.
Yeah, no problem. So a lot of the stuff with LumOS is really we spent a lot of that effort in development The very biggest pieces were we replaced BlueScale had a Windows CE operating system. That was very long in the tooth. It was something that we couldn't do a lot of new development in just because of its age and capabilities. And so we went to a current version of Linux. So Lumos is built off of a current version of Linux. It has all the latest security features built into it. Each release, we add the latest CVEs. We run a Nessus security scan. So you can actually run security scans against your tape library with Lumos on it, and it won't come up as like a denial of service, essentially, which you might have seen with the BlueScale system. It's very fast and efficient to use. And both Brian and JD talked about that. Lumos makes it, normal, enjoyable to use a tape library versus having to wait on things. And a lot of the issues that we had with BlueScale, those were all completely fixed in Lumos. And the only way to do that was to do a full ground up development. So it wasn't porting code or anything like that. It was a complete rewrite of the entire system. And it gives us the ability to also now move that into the future. And it has things like that REST API that these guys use to get all that telemetry off the library. And Lumos is actually REST first. So we develop the REST API or the REST commands for everything we do. And then we use those REST commands in the UI. So there's also always going to even be some stuff in the REST API that aren't in the user interface or the GUI until we get to that next release. But it's always available over REST. And it uses a standard open API, REST API. So you can take the YAML file off, plug it into most platforms that know how to use REST, and make that development of using the REST API pretty easy. And if you look at, why would you upgrade? A lot of it goes back to those same topics. It's got a modern operating system. It's got all the latest security patches in it. It's very efficient and easy to use. The UI is a complete new user interface. So you do have to, it's a little bit of a learning curve. You're going to take a couple days and understand where stuff is, but it's really intuitive. It's easy to find everything in that new user interface. We do replace some hardware when we do the Lumos upgrade. So it's not just a software upgrade. And to get the performance we wanted, you needed a new library control module. So a new LCM, the main kind of computer in the library. And that gives you a lot more memory, a lot faster memory, a much more modern, faster processor. It lets you do things like multi-threading. So you can do all those tasks in parallel versus, in just one at a time like you had to in BlueScale. We do add that weather station. If it's a Tfinity, we replace the CAN over power with an entirely new circuit board system that lets you have a much faster and also more robust interface to the robots. And then we replace the robotic control module with a library CAN repeater. And what that lets us do is all of Lumos is running on the library control module on that main computer board. So we aren't passing a lot of information and shared databases and that kind of stuff between the LCM and RCM over a really slow CAN bus. It's all running on a single board. It's all in shared memory. And that helps with all of that performance that we're looking for. And then if you look at going to the future, the other big benefit with Lumos is that we have a pretty robust roadmap, and we have a lot of stuff that'll be coming out that anybody that's running Lumos can get and use just by upgrading to the latest version. So we released Lumos 3.0 in January. That had a built-in drive test was the main feature there. So if you go to Lumos 3.0, you'll have to add some Spectra diagnostic cartridges, which are basically cartridges of the generation of drives that you have that we'll use for drive testing, robotics testing. Basically, we don't want to use your cartridges to do that kind of work. But with that, you no longer need to use ITDT. All the drive testing is all built into the library. And over time, we'll have a lot more intelligence built into it to where we'll be able to do a lot more proactive monitoring of drives as well. So that's now in Lumos. That's available in the field today. We have another release coming out here in April, and we'll have a media test that lets you test tape cartridges the same way and give you you can run a individual test on a cartridge and see the health of that cartridge, along with all the, proactive kind of continual monitoring we do with media lifecycle management. And then we're also adding, like I said, zoning for over the REST API. And the first software company that'll use that will be Versity. So they're already working on their implementation of that. And that'll let you do library zoning so that if you have one large partition, both robots can move around in parallel and you can get a lot higher robotic mount rates if you need it. Looking out in the future, we've got another release coming out in July, and we're going to have, two-factor authentication. We're going to add cold storage in there. So a lot of pretty cool features coming out there, both for security and for, giving you kind of a second level vaulting capability inside the library. And then we have a whole bunch of stuff on the back burner that we need to, we kind of schedule 2 releases out, and we add features into the next prioritized release based on customer input. So most of the stuff on this list comes from our user base, and the priority typically comes from the more people that are needing a certain feature that gets bumped up in priority and it gets put into a next release. So we do always want to hear from the field. We want to hear from existing customers and know what do you guys need? What do you want? How would it make it easier for you to use these systems?
So Matt, I'm going to take this opportunity to give a shameless plug. So the stuff you can't get from anybody else, the extensive roadmap, the multimedia, including LTO and enterprise, so-called enterprise drives, and a roadmap on stuff that is really visible and based on customer input.
Yeah, and these tape libraries they're very, very core to Spectra logic, right? That's one of the main things we do as a company, and that's a big difference between a lot of the other automation vendors out there, where it's kind of a smaller part or a piece of what they offer. This is very core to what Spectra does, and it's a huge priority for us. And we still put a lot of R&D back into tape systems.
Great, thank you, Matt. And I think you can see what's on here with. This was a demonstration of all the things that are coming. We didn't want to put the pressure on Matt to explain each one of these things, but if you have questions about this, again, go ahead and ask your question, or we'll give you contact information if you don't have contact information, or if you have a contact with a Spectra employee, a sales exec, and a sales engineer. We encourage you to ask these questions, and we're happy to answer them. We want to make sure that you go into these kinds of decisions as fully informed as possible. So now's the time when we jump into audience Q&A. We actually had a few folks. Sorry, go ahead.
Ted, I saw a couple come up. I saw it, Greg, you had one more around the Versity Scout AM side on how do you handle excess random user access requests so that you don't have these staging storms where it builds up and you're mounting a tape 100 times to get individual files off of it, that kind of stuff. I think Brian, you were maybe able to answer that one.
Yeah. So obviously you can't really control too much how often people are going to ask for the data. For Granite specifically, we tried to head this off with just put a really big cache in front of it. We definitely saw this issue come to life with HPSS back in the Blue Waters days. Through Globus, we would have towards the end, we had tons of users come in, request data, and we were just locked with Globus, just constantly reloading different tapes, tiny files. Some of this to catch that ahead of time, Scout AM has the built-in archival policies. So it wants to create a chunk of data a certain size, so you're not just blasting in a 2 KB file or something like that. I can't say there's any active steps we take to kind of mitigate that. We haven't had that issue occur on Granite. We have had the issue occur on our other archive that's not running LumOS. But that is more of a smaller cache. I think we only had like a 20 TB cache. And so we had an instance where we had like 13 files that were all larger than 2 TB get requested at once, and it kind of just locked the system. So there's definitely that risk. But building your policies to try to prevent the need for multiple tapes. And Scout AM is bringing along these features as well. Like, for example, if you have a big pool and somebody brings in a 30 TB file and Scout AM says, okay, we have this 30 TB file, go write this all to tape, it's going to load up every single tape it can. With the features coming, you can say, I only want 4 tapes dedicated or 4 drives dedicated to this pool at any time. That way you can only be writing from that pool onto 4 tapes instead of 20 tapes. So that's kind of how we head off the staging storms that can happen.
I think the guy who asked that question, Greg, thank you for that question, also said my my staging question is specific to Scout AM, which thank you, Brian, for answering that.
Yep.
We are currently running VSM and in process of Scout AM migration. I agree that LumOS rocks. So thank you, Greg, for that.
I will say I have no experience with VSM. I think I demoed it, but I did not. I can remember none of it.
Well, I think VSM was the right choice. If you're moving from like Oracle HSM and then you move to VSM and then you would move to Scout AM, just because Scout AM wasn't really available early on. VSM was the first product out there that was a good Oracle HSM replacement. So their path makes a lot of sense from a migration standpoint. Karsten, you asked a question about the weather station. Is there expected bigger difference between inside the library temperature, humidity, and outside the data center room climate? There's always going to be some difference. The tape library uses very little power, creates very little heat, but it does create some heat. And inside the library is going to be typically slightly warmer than the data center room outside of it. Humidity should be very similar. So you should be very similar humidity on the inside of the library than you are outside the library. We don't do a lot with there's no humidification, and the only dehumidification would be that it's slightly warmer. So you might see a little less humidity in the library cabinet than you would outside. And then again, if you read the tape drive, it's going to look quite a bit hotter and lower humidity from its perspective.
Do you want to keep going, Matt? There's a question from
and JD, you might be able to help with this one. On the LTO9 relative humidity thing that you guys saw, what was the surprise that you experienced that caused the out of bounds relative humidity?
Yeah, just the reliability of the data center's humidification system. I think it's specifically a fan module, and I'm not familiar with the mechanics of the exact humidification system. We let our facilities personnel handle that, but I think they weren't used to us having equipment in the data center that was actually operationally that sensitive to humidity fluctuations, and so we were the first to notice. And I think that they were it's affected their prioritization of fixing that unit and managing that unit and making sure that they're proactively monitoring it. It was kind of one of those things that they kind of kept an eye on, but it was kind of back burner, and now we've had to kind of tell them like, no, this is a very critical part. They obviously knew that like if the HVAC, if the cooling system went down, data centers are gonna have big problems with all of our GPUs pumping and all that stuff like that. But I think they realized that humidity played an important role for us. So it's kind of us getting with facilities and educating them about like, hey, this aspect of the data center environmental control is actually much more critical for us operationally now. We can't not service tape mounts. So and they were very understanding. They're a great team to work with. So there's no concern there. But it was just a kind of a resyncing of expectations between the two teams there. So
well, and that is one of those unique things about tape, right? Is that it's environmentally it cares about temperature and humidity more than any other things in the data center, and that is something that people need to keep an eye on. And LTO9 was even a little more sensitive than prior generations. And luckily, LTO10 is a big step improvement over LTO9 from a drive robustness perspective when you look at temperature and humidity and how it handles that with the whole new head mechanism and how LTO10 was designed to deal with those kind of changes in the tape better than LTO9 was. So, it's good that we're seeing in the future that hopefully it becomes less of an issue, but tape is always going to be a lot more sensitive just because of the type of media it is, and that it's an open media type versus like a laser welded helium sealed hard drive. Tape is out there in the wild. It's the tape coming out of the cartridge into the drive experiences the ambient temperature that it's running in. So it is something we have to keep a more of a closer eye on than you would with anything else in your data center, typically from a temperature and humidity standpoint.
How many tracks are across that tape now?
I don't even remember on LTO10. I'd have to look. It was
every little bit
yeah.
just stretches and shrinks it.
Yeah.
So just to piggyback on that, so in our data center, we have a very large data center. I can't speak to the square footage. JD might be able to. But you saw the 19 frame library, and having a library that long, we actually do get a difference, a gradient in humidity across it. And that's just because of where certain things are in the data center regarding water pumps, regarding liquid cooled racks, non-liquid cooled racks. We have 6 different sensors across the entirety of our data center, and I think I've seen a variation of at least 20% across different sensors at the same time. So we at least do get a very large churn in humidity. Um, I will say, being in Illinois, we get the joy of having no humidity in the winter and too much humidity in the summer. But we've not had the too much humidity in the data center, luckily. So
Yeah, and tape doesn't do well with really low humidity. And being in Colorado, we're typically down in the teens. And we have to, if we're doing testing of tape drives, we have to dehumidify all the time. So you do have to look at both ends of that spectrum. I actually looked real quick. There's over 15,000 data tracks on an LTO-10 tape. So you think about that, that very small, piece of media going across, and there's over 15,000 tracks going across that tape.
um so I saw somebody asked about Scout AM versus HPSS. Um so I would say the main advantage of Scout AM versus HPSS is just manageability, just in the general sense. You start Scout AM, system CTL start Scout AM. When I started HPSS, I had to start, oh God, the PVR, the PVL, the core server, and they all had to be started in a very exact order at very specific times. And if anything got out of whack, HPSS would fall over. Um, Scout AM, it does, we archive management software is not perfect. We have ran into issues, but 90% of the time, the issues resolved in less than an hour. Back when we would have issues with HPSS, it was a day. If we had something knock HPSS over, it was a whole day to turn it back on. So that's the biggest advantage, I would say. Other than that, just pure simplicity of a POSIX presented mount. You have the fuse mount with HPSS, but that was kind of difficult to implement. It's not as reliable, at least at the time that I was using it. With Scout AM, it just looks like a basic file system to the user, or a bucket if they're using S3.
Oh, hey, Ted, we can't hear you. I think that actually covered most of the questions we had. So if anyone else has any other questions they'd like to ask, happy to cover them. If not, Ted, if you want to jump to the next slide. Please reach out if you have questions. We can go through roadmap items on LumOS and go into exact things that are coming out. Please contact the Spectra sales team with any kind of questions around what it takes to upgrade to LumOS. And then reach out if you just have any general questions about tape or best practices, how to use tape, what the roadmap for tape drives looks like, any of that kind of stuff. Please, reach out, and we're happy to, set up some time to go through that stuff with you. With that, I'd really like to thank everybody for getting on today, and have a great rest of your Tuesday.